Calaveras County, and welcome to another edition of Mondo Calaveras. I'm your host, Mike Taylor. Now this time I'm going to suggest that we put on our thinking caps and get ready to absorb some really interesting information, because my guest this time has something fascinating to show us. And, well, Vance Turner, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Now, Vance, what have you come up with? This is just fascinating.
Well, we started with a little project. Somebody had given me a problem where they were trying to build a mobile water purification unit, and they wanted to use solar panels to basically drive this. Mm-hmm. And the problem was that the pump that was in this water purification unit was using up more energy.
Way too much power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was what created the real problem for all of these people that want to do these portable solutions, is the size of the solar field that would actually have to drive them.
Sure.
And I was out in my vineyard, and I was putting new trellising in. And when you put trellising in, you put the iron post, and you got the steel wire behind it. Mm-hmm. And being the electrical engineer that I am, I remembered back in the old days that most people think that the telegraph was powered by a battery. But what they really don't realize is that it was an iron post on one end of the wire and a copper on the other end, and it used what was called telluric current of the earth to actually power it. And not that a lot of people know about this, but even pipelines use this to drive some of the sensors that are on their pipelines.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To be able to power their small systems that they have out there. Mm-hmm. It's not voltage. It's very low voltage, 1 to 2 volts, but it's a lot. It can be a lot of current. In fact, it can be so much current it can kill you.
Oh man!
So I said, I could use this to electrolyze water into hydrogen, oxygen gas, and I wonder if I could build a pump around that. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy back in the 1800s called Humphreys back in in Australia, who had built a Humphreys pump that was based on wood gas. And I said, well, I don't have to open it up to the atmosphere. I can basically keep it closed in a closed cycle. Yeah. And I could actually use these gases to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And the shock wave and all the other things that come along with that. And a lot of people told me that I was completely nuts. But
the new idea is always going to generate some of that response, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially a reputable person that is supposed to have gone to school and knows what he's talking about.
So you've basically kind of reinvented a pump.
Well, it's going to be more than that, because it actually makes us rethink how we do energy altogether. Oh. Because nobody really thought that a pump could actually change the world. Mm-hmm. But when you think about what we were doing, this sets a universal standard for chemical energy to pressure. Oh, okay. And pressure is what's used to be able to do work. Mm-hmm. So whether you're moving water, whether you're driving a turbine, whether you're going to do hydraulics, and a lot of people want to go to water hydraulics, this pump will be at the center of being able to do that efficiently.
Okay. Can you give those of us who didn't get a degree with a bunch of letters after it, can you kind of explain how this works?
Well, it's basically the same as any traditional combustion chamber motor, like in your car engine. Sure. You basically put oxygen and fuel in there, and sometimes you have to compress it. Yep. They do that for a reason. And you explode that, and it gives you work. Okay? We don't have a compression cycle. Okay. So what we are doing is that we are introducing into a pipeline combustion chamber that basically we take hydrogen, oxygen gas that we've electrolyzed and inject that into the combustion chamber, and we explode that, and that creates a hypersonic shock wave, nearly Mach 4.5, which is the fastest chemical reaction on the planet or in the universe. And we use that to actually push against water, which is non-compressible, and it acts as a piston, and it expels the water out of the combustion chamber.
Oh, wow.
Once it's done that, it creates a vacuum. And from the graph here, you can see that we end up with a vacuum down near about 2.5 psi absolute every time that we operate this pump. So where most combustion engines, you get pressure, you don't get vacuum on that backside. What we end up is that we can do work that other things can't do because we get the pressure on one side and then we get the immediate vacuum coming after that.
It sounds very efficient, too.
It is efficient. And when people start to really model this, and I get the resources to show how efficient that this is, we're going to find out that it's probably one of the highest efficiencies that you can reach.
Wow.
And I won't even go into that number because I know it's in the 90s.
Wow.
And I don't know of another process out there that will be able to even get close to this in efficiency.
Where are you kind of in the inventor, practical, here's the pump?
We have a second prototype that's built.
Wow.
And I hope you guys come up and we can get some film of you guys seeing the pump in operation.
Oh, yeah.
We're doing single shots right now because the gas delivery that's on there is set for applying only enough gas per cycle or per charge to equal 1 psi. So when we want to build up to 50 psi, we have to operate it 50 times, which takes about a minute or so to count everything up, so that we can actually start producing the data sets of a graph of this much gas produces this much pressure, followed by this much vacuum. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody ever produced any of those graphs. So we'll be able to have a data set that we can work with to be able to size our pumps later on down the line based on these initial single cell experiments that we're working on right now.
How big is this?
It's 40 liters.
PSI.
It's about 2 feet tall, about 12 inches on a diameter, holds about 40 liters, and is engineered to 10,000 PSI. Wow. And we can operate it up to 1,500 because our level sensor and our pressure sensor are limited to 1,500 PSI. And right now, because of the velocity that we generate on the water, I'm afraid to take it over 50 PSI. Because, well, most people, 50 PSI is a lot of pressure. But we generate at Mach 4.5, it generates a lot of velocity.
I bet.
So sizing things start to be completely different when you start looking at the amount of pressure we can actually push and the volumes that are entailed. So most of the fire engines around here, those guys are operating at pressures that take 2 or 3 men to be able to hold those hoses, and you don't want to let one go.
Yeah.
And the same thing is in effect here.
Okay. And you talk about an explosion. Is that what kind of gets the pump going? Where is that combustion taking place?
The pump is oriented so that the water is basically below it.
Okay.
It gets pulled in. So this pump is self-priming. So if we had a dry system, we would basically just put the gas in there. We'd do the explosion. It would drive the air out. That vacuum would sit here and pull the water into it and basically fill it. So the more we operate it, the more it purges the air out of the system.
Sure.
So it's a self-priming pump, and we just do it that way.
What are some of the, I guess I'll say, quickest practical applications for this?
Well, the thing that's really interesting about it is that because we get down to the 2.5 psi and that we do have a hypersonic shock wave, I know that right now, because the 2 psi that we're working with is based on the vapor pressure of water, that's our steady state that we can reach. And if we use Bernoulli correctly, we can use that shock wave to actually drive the vacuum even lower. Oh. So even at the 2.5 psi we're at, we can boil water at between 140 Fahrenheit and 122.
Really?
So, yes. Wow. So that means that we could use solar panels to basically purify water. Mm-hmm. If we were to use this pump down at the sanitation district, we could basically boil off the water from the sewage and basically freeze dry the sewage in the plant.
Oh, wow.
So we will be able to do water clarification mm-hmm. at rates and energies that no one else can really reach without a lot of expense.
Wow. And all from an idea that came to you in your vineyards?
All that came from a little project in the vineyards. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's what we are trying to do right now, we're going to try to get a storage container down at the wellhead, and we're going to use that drawing right there. We're going to put the pump on the wellhead, but in the storage container we'll have all the plumbing that's in there, mm-hmm. and we're going to use that to actually drive the well pump, and then we're going to replace all the trellising in the vineyard. And what I look forward to is the day where I don't use the utility to be able to run the electrolyzer and just mm-hmm. leave the vineyard itself driving the pump and wow. producing the current that's necessary to operate this device.
And how big a solar panel would you need for that? Or once this starts, does it kind of almost become a little bit self-perpetuating?
Well, the just from this graph right here, what that yeah. represents is that we could operate a pump on basically 2 liters of hydrogen gas, and we could move 6,226 gallons of water in an hour.
Wow.
But we know that we can this pump will actually move more of that mm-hmm. depending on the pressures that we want to do. And we're talking about being able to move water at rates that are not heard of on the planet right now.
Wow. And so where do you see this going? Well, I guess, actually, how far along this are you? How close are you to producing, here's the pump kind of thing?
We have the pump. Mm-hmm. We have the pump. The problem now is having the funding and the resources available to us to basically put it in process.
Oh, okay.
We are working to be able to take our prototype now and find venues to be able to put it in process to demonstrate its operation. Mm-hmm. There are some things that we're trying to work with on the gas delivery so that we can speed things up, mm-hmm. but we need mass flow controllers instead of the model that we have right now for gas delivery that uses a couple of accumulators.
When you say gas, what are we using?
Hydrogen. We have hydrogen and oxygen gas.
Okay.
So we use those, we mix those in the 2-to-1 relationship, which is really interesting because if you burn hydrogen with other stuff, like hydrogen and air, it's mm-hmm. not that efficient. What you really want is, and when you look at the shock wave and you look at the pressures that are attained, that 2-to-1 relationship of taking water back in, or hydrogen, oxygen, gas back into water is the best way to be able to get the forces that we're looking for.
And it sounds incredibly clean, too.
We got a closed pipeline.
Yeah, so you're not really expelling anything.
We're not.
You're just moving the water.
That's right.
Now, can this be done to move something else? I mean, could you pump oil with this pump?
Well, you don't want to do things where you're moving. I look at it more like you can move water.
Okay.
Could I mm-hmm. sit here and do things like we were talking to some folks that were running plants that are down in Nevada that contain pools of acids and things like that.
Oh, man.
And their pumps don't last longer than about 30 days. So the answer is that we could actually produce these pumps in ceramics and actually move caustic chemicals that normal pumps can't move mm-hmm. at much more efficiencies. And, other than we would have to rethink how we do ignition so that we don't have any metal as the igniter.
Yeah, that's where I guess my brain is getting a little hung up on the fact that we have this closed system. So it's kind of whatever you're moving has to be your sort of catalyst, right?
Yes, and when we first we had an igniter that we had a problem with, and we had to go down to the local AutoZone and get a new spark plug, and the only spark plug that would replace that igniter was the original spark plug from a Model T.
Oh my gosh!
So we're using. I find that kind of historically interesting.
Yeah, there's some kind of irony there.
There is, but working through these problems of ignition. These are the early days.
Sure,
we're talking about a Model T pump for a new generation that's coming forward.
Yeah.
And, who knows how far this thing can go.
Mm-hmm. Before we started the show, you were talking about rocket engines, too. How does this play into that?
Well, if you go on, the University of Cincinnati's DET Lab has a video of some of the new rocket motors that they're working on where they're doing what's called pulse detonation. Mm-hmm. And that pulse detonation is identical to what we're doing. Our pulse detonation is actually moving water. But they're using the pulse detonation to actually move rockets.
Wow.
Now, they don't actually add water to their pulse detonation. And I'm going to give them a clue, is that if you were to add the water to the pulse detonation, you actually get that superheated steam component.
Oh, wow.
And you'll actually get more coming out of that pulse detonation.
Kind of a bigger, better rocket.
Yeah.
So University of Cincinnati needs to give you a call.
Well,
or have you called them?
We're trying to work with them because there are some of the groups that we're working with. We're not finding a lot of resources here in California to work with me, but we do have a lot of people in the Youngstown, Ohio area.
Wow.
St. Jimmy, that's the mayor of Lowellville, Ohio, is really working with us and trying to get us out there into an R&D facility. We have the T-Bike organization, which is in Warren, Ohio, which is where the Packard came from.
Okay.
They want to get us out there. And we're right now trying to round up enough money so that, I can pack up my truck and my trailer and all the other things that I need to take out there and head out there for a while and work with their folks that are going to help us build a company around this technology.
Is this few feet by a foot cylinder, this pump, the prototype, is it mobile?
It is mobile. It's on a little cart.
Yeah.
And so, that's what I was saying. We took the pressure up above 50, and the thing weighs about 350 pounds, and the velocity of the water came out so fast that it almost drove that 350 pounds over on its side.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
Well, velocity is an amazing thing.
It is what it is. The laws of physics are laws for a reason, right?
Right. And when you've got our outlet is on a 2-inch outlet and a 2-inch inlet. So at 2 inches for the pressures and the vacuums that we're working at, you don't want to have any body parts around this.
Wow.
Because you can seriously get hurt because it's not going to stop.
Yeah.
You can't put your thumb over the garden hose on this.
Mm-hmm. Now, so can you also scale this down to use
ultimately,
it in smaller...
right now, the pump is a single cell. But in the long term, there will be a set of multi-cells. And one of our earliest ones that we did was a prototype that was based in polycarbonate. And what was really interesting is that it was a multi-cell polycarbonate, and we got the cells the wrong size. That's why we have this new 40 liters so that we can figure out from 40 liters down what our optimum size and scale will be. But when we get the pump operating, we'll have these polycarbonates all in line. We'll be able to have them in a larger block together, and we will fire them in sequence. And what's really nice is that it'll be a piece of art at the same time, because you'll be able to watch that white light that comes off the explosion followed by the next one and look like the warp engine of pumps moving water.
Oh, Jiminy.
Yeah. So
now, when you say we, Vance, who is we? Does your company have a name, and that kind of thing?
We have a holding company. It's called Vance Holdings Incorporated.
Okay.
That just holds on to the IP.
Mm-hmm.
There are a set of individuals that are working with us right now, just trying to help us round up money and round up help and all the other things that go along with that.
Yeah.
And, we're completely on a shoestring. But, these are the people that I'm beholding to because they know what we have and they know that we're trying to do something with this. And we're trying to solve a lot of problems.
Is this something where these, and forgive me if I get it wrong, so correct me, but these cells, is this, you put a cell here and then a mile down the pipeline there's another cell, or, is this something
water pumps are like that. You have to look at, how we flow water. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Delta Mondo Canal, you've basically built a canal on one side and you're pushing water up to get it in, then you're using gravity to flow it all the way down to Southern California and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Okay, but there are certain places where there are pumping facilities, like there's another one that's down near the reservoir that's down near Los Banos. And then you've got the pumping stations that have to push it all the way up over the Grapevine and then back into the LA area.
You can actually see all those pipes going up the hill.
And I look forward to the day that somebody realizes that for the amount of energy that they're using for the Delta Mondo Canal to move water from Northern California down to Southern California, this pump will actually operate out in Southern California for the same amount of electricity and produce clean water out of the ocean more efficiently than you can move it from Northern California to Southern California.
So you desalinate in the process.
Yeah, I thought the concept, I went down to the State House and walked to every door. And if you think that their State House is welcoming...
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
And the deal that comes out of this is that somewhere down the line, people will realize that there are better ways than building tunnels and taking our water that we have from Northern California and distributing it throughout the state. Yeah. And then not putting the resources back into the communities where they take the water. Calaveras County produces more water than any other county in the state of California, and we get no revenues out of that. And we should have... there should be monies that come back into our county reflective of that water. But, water is, the state thinks that it owns all the water in the state.
Yeah.
That's why they just came down with that new rule so that you can have cisterns on your house to be able to catch your rainwater.
Catch rainwater.
Should have been able to do that for the
hundreds of years ago.
Since the state was... Right. But a lot of people think that, water is a way of being able to control people. And this pump is going to give us a way that basically takes that away and gives us the ability to be able to recycle water.
So do you, and let's keep with this fresh water notion for just a minute. So do you envision, some of these pumps sitting in the ocean down in Southern California, and they're pumping the water into the city?
When you take a glass of water, that glass of water started out in the ocean somewhere, and it evaporated up, and it came inland as distilled water, and then it fell on the ground, picked up a few minerals, and then you got the right water that you need by it pulling minerals from the ground. This pump can do that same thing. It can flash distill at low pressure.
Wow.
Now, when you pull water, you can only pull water up 32 feet of vacuum before it actually turns into steam.
Okay.
So this pump could sit there down along the ocean sides, obscure as can be, and be pulling water at fixed intervals down the state and on small scales and be able to produce all the water that the state would ever need.
Yeah. And so that folks get an idea
and that leaves the salt basically there.
Right there where it started.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you don't, part of the problem with large-scale desalination facilities is that they have to deal with the brine. But if you can figure out how you're basically moving water from the currents, and there are a lot of places around the state where there are currents, you can basically recycle the water through your pool and push that brine back out so that it doesn't create a problem to life forms.
How big a pump? Would this have to be a bigger than your prototype pump to help, say, San Diego, juice up its water distribution system?
Well, that's why I was saying, when you look at the fact that the pump when you explode the hydrogen oxygen gas, it actually breaks a few of the water bonds in the water and creates a little bit extra hydrogen oxygen depending on how much gas we start with.
Okay.
And it also superheats the water to steam, which gives us a little bit more efficiency. So when we start building these pumps larger, they'll become more efficient.
Yeah.
And because we can do what we do, it makes this pump the world's fastest pressure pump and the fastest vacuum pump because it can generate pressure in milliseconds and it creates vacuum in about a second, to take things down to vacuums that you just can't do with mechanical pumps. So we'll be able to do amazing things in the future with this pump. Not only that, but ultimately it will replace the steam cycle in how we generate electricity.
Sure.
Because we'll be able to use the pump to directly drive turbines with room temperature water with no requirement for steam. And people don't understand how inefficient a steam plant really is because you use all that energy to heat the water.
To make the steam.
And then you got to cool it, and then you got to use all that energy to heat the water. And that's why we have a little slide in here where we've basically taken the cooling cycle out, and we use that pump to basically repressurize the steam in a new steam cycle, so that we would never have to cool the water or cool the steam to begin with to reintroduce it back to the turbine. So we can use the pump to fix existing electricity plants, or we can use this to develop new water-driven plants.
My gosh. Ladies and gentlemen, it's obvious we have to keep an eye on Vance Turner. And tell us the company name one more time.
Vance Technologies.
Vance Technologies. Keep an eye on these new pumps, and before long, we'll be super efficient. Thank you so much for being here, Vance. We've learned way too much, and we can't wait to see these pumps in use.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing that world's record marshmallow shot.
That's it.
And
so
we're gonna go for a world's record with the pump with Guinness
too. Great. All right. So until next time, I'm Mike Taylor. Enjoy.